All right, hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to read chapter 14. That's not a surprise, that's a kick in the teeth. Juanita led us back to the street, and Benny and I rode the bus home in silence. I felt like I had all the pieces to a puzzle, but I couldn't get them to fit. By the time I got off the bus, I was as confused as ever. That night at dinner, Dad hinted twice at the surprise. Our super suits? Benny's eyes were hungry. Are our super suits down in the root cellar? Said Dad, making a mock scolding motion with his finger. No questions until after dinner. Benny ate with gusto, shoveling food into his mouth like it was a race. After dinner, Rodney stayed upstairs to clear the table and do the dishes. Dad and Mom led Benny and me down to the main room of the root cellar. Dad leaned against a work table and tried a little too hard to look casual. Mom sat in a chair and smiled, but she looked nervous, like she was about to put on a big show. Clearing his throat, Dad said, "As you boys know, this family has a wide variety of superpowers, and those superpowers are used for different purposes." Benny raised his hand, but Dad ignored him. I could tell he'd planned out this speech and would keep on talking until he was finished. Many of the family's superpowers are quite useful during battles, but other powers work better in the special ops missions, like Great Uncle Pete over in Oak City. He can shrink to roughly the size of a taco. When we need somebody to sneak into small places, he's our man. Dad clasped his hands behind his back. Other powers, like your brother Rodney's, for example, are much better suited for background work. Rodney is an important member of our team, even though he almost never gets to go to the battles. But he still gets to go every once in a while, Benny said, choosing his words carefully. And he still has a super suit. Dad looked at Mom as if asking for help. Mom said nothing. Finally, Dad looked back to Benny. Your mother and I have had a long talk, and we've discussed it with a few other members of the family. I think for right now, it's better to have you boys stay away from the battles, where it's safe. Benny smiled and nodded. I think I was as surprised as Dad and Mom. Then I saw Benny's eyes grow wide. Wait, he cried. You mean we never get to go to a battle? Well, Dad said, I don't know if you'll never get to go to a battle, but for now, it's just not. Benny was out of his chair in a flash. That's not fair. Desperate, he looked in my direction. Rafter, tell them. The battles aren't even dangerous. The Johnsons aren't trying to kill us. They think they're superheroes too. Now wasn't the best time to try to explain anything to my parents, but I couldn't leave my brother out to dry. He's right, I said. Dad, you told me on patrol that I should find out for myself. I don't know what all the answers are yet, but something isn't right. I think we should try to sit down and talk with the Johnsons. Dad rubbed the sides of his head with the tips of his fingers. Dear, can you help me out here? Mom finally spoke. The other thing to remember, Benny dear, is that you're both due for a growth spurt. We wouldn't want you to get a super suit and then have you grow right out of it. Growth spurt? Benny said, almost shouting. I don't get a super suit because I'm due for a growth spurt? We've come up with another way you can help this family, Dad said, and this is the big surprise. Benny folded his arms tightly across his chest and glared at Dad. I hoped for Benny's sake that Dad had come up with a suitable replacement for not getting his suits. When we go on the special ops missions, Dad said, we usually drive a big van. There's plenty of room in there, and the team usually does some last-minute prep work on the ride to the location. You know, check their gear, do a few stretching exercises, things like that. You don't want to pull a hamstring in the middle of a special ops mission, Mom said, nodding at Benny and me. Dad continued, but whoever is driving can't prep. Sometimes they show up and the whole team has to wait while they double-check their gear. So your mother and I have decided that you boys can become experts at all the motor pool vehicles. When you're old enough to drive, you can prove yourselves very valuable by... That's the surprise? Benny asked, his eyes bugging out. We get to work in the motor pool? The motor pool is a very fun place, Mom said. Benny's mouth hung open. That's not a surprise. That's a kick in the teeth. I can't even drive for 4 more years. In the meantime, Dad said, you'll start by learning the different machines. keeping them maintained and cleaning, checking the oil and tire pressure, things like that. For the past 3 years, I'd had a mental image of what I'd like as a superhero. I'd imagined what my supersuit would look like. I'd imagined the heroic things I'd do. And now the mental image was replaced with a new image. I could see it as clear as the cowlick on the top of Dad's head. Me in overalls, grease covering my hands and face. I had a wrench in my hand, and I was working on Uncle Chambers' Datsun. Our family had really boring cars. We had to so that we could fit in, and now I got to work on these really boring cars. Rafter Bailey, mechanic to the superheroes. So we're supposed to wash cars and change oil until we're old enough to drive? Benny said. And then we'll drive everybody to the really cool missions and just wait in the car? I could tell Benny was close to crying. Maybe when we finally do get our super suits, after our growth spurts, they will come with cute little chauffeur hats. Dad's voice became firm. Your cousin Dirk is in charge of the family motor pool up at Grandpa's ranch. Starting tomorrow, both of you boys will report there after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, plus every other Saturday. You'll learn about all the vehicles this family owns and anything else Dirk asks you to do. This isn't a request. This is your duty as superheroes. This is how you'll help us find the Johnsons. Dad finished his speech with a shake of a fist. Benny's voice sounded weak. The battles aren't even dangerous, he pleaded. I'm sorry, son. I knew Dad meant it. Benny fled the room. Dad and Mom looked at me. If they'd told me this a week ago, I would have felt exactly like Benny, angry, frustrated, and disappointed. But my understanding of the world had been turned upside down. Something else was going on, something that was more important than battles. I'll talk to him, I said. I found my brother on his bed, face down in his pillow. Benny, I said. This is our chance. His voice was muffled. It's finally our chance to be real heroes. You're already a hero, I said. What do you mean? He asked. I couldn't help but smile. Aren't you the one who was going to stand up to a super in the school library with nothing more than a jack-in-the-box belly button? Benny didn't move. Do you believe Juanita? I asked, or do you think she's lying? Benny rolled over. I don't know. It seems like she's telling the truth. What do you think? I think I'm missing something, I said. Something obvious. If she is telling the truth and our family stopped fighting, I finally understood. Then you'll never get to go to a battle. Benny nodded. Why don't you drop and give me 50? I said. Benny snorted. I can only do 16, he said. Then drop and give me 16, I said, smiling. Benny sat up on the bed, his head hanging. I didn't have to imagine my brother's disappointment because I felt the same way. Benny pushed himself off the bed and knelt on the floor. He stared at the carpet for a few moments, then raised his head to look at me. One way or another, I'm going to get my supersuit, he said. And when I do, I'm going to challenge Grandpa to a push-up contest. And I'm going to beat him. I watched Benny do his push-ups and moved the pieces to the puzzle around in my head.